Most of us will be forgotten, and that's not because we failed, but like time moves forward, right? And memory is limited. And even the people that we think as most important will, they will fade into abstraction. And this isn't harsh, it's quite proportional. For most of human history, people have lived very full lives without ever expecting to be remembered, and that this pressure to be significant is actually quite new, and it's actually very heavy. I'm sure it's something that resonates for at least a few, and being forgotten doesn't mean that someone didn't matter. It just sort of means that their life wasn't meant to carry indefinitely, and memory isn't a moral system, it's a practical one. And most lives are lived without ever having left a permanent trace, and that doesn't invalidate them in the slightest. And somewhere along the way, we started believing that our lives needed to scale, and that we needed to be seen and remembered and acknowledged. And this sort of makes ordinary life feel insufficient. The mundane begins to feel insufficient, even though this is what we all experience, this is what we all go through. And when you live for remembrance, you stop living for experience. Legacy sort of turns life into a performance. Billions of people have lived, they've loved, they've struggled, the exact same experiences that we have, and they've died without being remembered by name, and their lives are not placeholders. They were complete. Scale doesn't erase meaning. It conceptualizes it, right? Now, when I was younger, and I mean really young, I used to be afraid of dying, and I would freak out at night, and it would always happen at night because weirdly enough, that's when my biggest thoughts hit the hardest. And I would run down to my dad and I'd explain what was going on. I'm afraid of dying. And he would tell me that it's okay and everyone has to go at some point. And I was really small when he was explaining this. I couldn't have been more than like 6 or 7. I had an idea of death, but I didn't. And my fear was not knowing what came after, or maybe the lack of what came after. But as I grew older, it sort of became a fear of oblivion, right? And when people die, sometimes they are left with gravestones by the people they loved because they were remembered by that person that loved them. And that's not to say that people who don't get gravestones are not loved or weren't remembered, because I'm sure they were, but eventually the person that left that gravestone for you or for a person, they will die, and someone will place a gravestone for them and they will die, and eventually the memory of the first person will be lost and forgotten. And I am very vocal online. My digital footprint is super massive, and I don't doubt that when I die I will still be stored up in the cloud somewhere on a massive supercomputer with a little light blinking just to show that I existed. But eventually, that supercomputer that held my memory will eventually die, and it will get switched off, and with that my memory will go too. And in an even bigger prospect is that one day the earth will die out, and everyone significant that we have ever known, Cleopatra, Henry VIII, the founding fathers of America, although I don't think they're too particularly significant, all of these people will be forgotten when the sun collapses in on itself and becomes a dying star, and when all the other little stars are faded out and burnt out of energy, and when eventually when the sky goes dark, and it will, there will be no memory of anything or anyone, and the sky will become a cosmic graveyard of what once was. And that is okay, no one will be remembered in the very long run, There is freedom in knowing that you don't have to be exceptional to be valid. You don't have to justify your output or performance, and you're allowed to live without spectacle. And what actually lasts isn't, it's not names or stories, it's influence without attribution. A kindness that might shift someone's life, or like a moment that changes how someone sees the world. These are the things that don't need to be traced back to you. You could change someone's trajectory for the better, and they might never remember that it was you, and that is perfectly okay because you still had that impact. Temporary things can be complete. A life can end without echoing and still be whole. When you release the need to be remembered, and when you release the need to be remembered, you become more present. You become more grounded, and you'll start to pay attention to what's right in front of you rather than the mark that you might leave in the future, your legacy, right? And you don't need witnesses for your life to count. You don't need a legacy to justify your existence, and you can be one life and have lived it fully, and that will be enough. And I think I'm going to end that video there. Sorry for something so existential, but it is in fact 12:30 in the morning. And I realise that I don't necessarily need to record during the daytime because I can emulate it with a lamp. How cool is that? Mind-boggling. Yeah, I hope you're all happy and healthy, and I hope this one doesn't hit too hard. I love to get a little bit existential and philosophical, but might rattle some bones. But yeah, I will catch you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching as always.